Welcome back. It's After the Ashes, the beautiful Altadena podcast looking at our landscape post fire and our recovery through a public policy lens. I'm Shauna Dawson Beer.
Oh, I'm Steve Sachs. Sorry. It's not the same without you next to me.
I just love that this is all video recorded now. So when Steve's like glazed over, you all get to enjoy the same thing that I do. Welcome back. So this is episode 2.
We're going to work our way through the new
Sorry.
system here. Come on.
I know. This is season 2, episode 10. We're recording on Tuesday, February 26th. And we're going to jump right into the issues. Episode 9, our last episode, a very lengthy dive into media and updates because we've been dark for a few weeks. There was a lot to talk about. For this one, I think, I'm going to say Mr. Sachs goes to Washington. We have some fun things to talk about. You have some fun things to talk about.
I might be more successful than our governor is when he goes there.
How much can you talk about, Steve? And how are there things that you can't talk about yet or shouldn't? Or anyhow, tell us what you can tell us.
All right. Well, I mean, look, those that are the avid readers, all 6 of you, because I think I have 1 or 2 more this week. You probably read the iterations of this question about the EDA. The EDA is the Economic Development Agency. So what does it all mean? I guess that's the real question. The Economic Development Agency is an older agency that puts out money through various groups or various commissions and direct grants to cities and towns. They basically got shut down by Doge because there's a lot of overlap of what they do with some of the HUD, Housing and Urban Development money. But over the last couple of weeks, we've had, the administration coming out here. We had discussions among the people in the Palisades because they get all the attention and we don't. This notion of creating a federally chartered rebuilding authority or a county rebuilding authority. We'll go into that in a minute. But the bottom line is the county or the federal model would require congressional authorization, which is messy. It's getting anything through Congress these days is a cluster.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to some people about this, and the county has its rebuilding authority motion that Supervisor Barger put forth, and there were a lot of words in there that sounded very familiar, Shauna?
Right. Like
and,
as if specific language that Steve has been hammering home repeatedly in his Substack was lifted, copy and paste by.
As my dad used to say, don't let your hand get tired, patting yourself on the back. But
I don't think you need to. It's about back patting, but I think it's a fascinating scenario, as we've said many times.
It's form of flattery, right?
Indeed, and we've said here many times, like we are long past the world of coincidence, right? So it is fascinating and insightful always to see verbatim language that no one else has used but you or even us on this podcast, and then all of a sudden it's turning up practically copy and paste in a county document, in a supervisor motion, in a media story. It is a fascinating process. And we've said this before. We know who's listening. We know who listens to this.
Or who's been reading. So
yep.
So when we were looking at that, one of the questions that came up with the AG investigation was, if there's a lawsuit, what does that mean for the county and the rebuilding? And because, again, the county being brought into this is because the federal government wants to bypass the state. They don't feel the state is a trusted actor. But to get the money from the federal government, the way it's being structured right now, it has to be a sovereign counterparty. What that means is it has to be a government to government, similar to what was happening with the water wars or the water money that was coming in, and the question that the mutuals couldn't get the money direct from the earmark. It had to go through a sovereign counterparty, which was the Foothill Water District, and then they could push it out, and how they could push it out. And we started coming up with some ideas there. So you start to have this build happening, And if the AG's investigation does turn up civil rights issues,
Mm-hmm.
and if those civil rights are a result of anything that had federal money attached to it, so if the disaster response system had federal grant money that was given to this county to, execute its function, and it didn't, that triggers the Department of Justice being brought into this civil rights issue, which could really cloud the county's ability to be a counterparty because it adds a different legal dimension to this. And so as that was happening, and as there was question about whether or not a national story was going to come from the environmental issues, which the county is directly responsible for the current implementation of the rebuild, not talking Army Corps of Engineers, we're talking about the after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And the environmental concerns that have occurred after the Army Corps had left, does that then complicate the situation further? And the answer came back to this could be a complete cluster. And
Right.
is the county the appropriate counterparty? Which,
Right.
I said to you, Shauna, when the AG's investigation started, was that a question of being able to bring in the variable of kicking the state into the role of being the counterparty against the county? Now, again, obviously there was the civil rights concern, but is this a secondary plus one, so to speak, that the state gets from a political perspective? Then it really hit home because less than a week later, you had the county district attorney talking about criminal cases against SCE, which could then plunge one of the governor's biggest donors into bankruptcy, which now does that become a leverage point that they're having a little bit of a political dance in the background? We don't know. I'm just putting that out there for people to consider. As this was all going on, and as you're watching the scorpions go at each other, in my mind, between the county and the state, there was the question of, well, okay, this isn't solving Altadena's problem, right? This isn't getting us to where we need to go. And I said, well, if the big hindrance right now is this sovereign counterparty model that exists, but what if there was a way around that? And I was talking to some people, and I started thinking about the Appalachian. I started thinking about Katrina, and started thinking about
Okay.
like the Delta Authority and some of these commissions that we've set up. And I said, I think California has one of these regional commissions, like the Appalachian Regional Commission. And we do. And I said, well, that's under EDA. And they said, yeah. And I said, we started doing some research, and we said, does EDA require a sovereign entity to be the counterparty? And the answer is no. Does the EDA like to have capital stacking on its funds, so it's first in risk type funding? The answer is yes. When the CDBG money comes in, it's for infrastructure. So is EDA. That money can go through nonprofits, community-based nonprofits, community development corporations. We don't have to have the county or the state involved.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay. And they said I kept asking more questions, and the answers came back. What about housing? Well, pre-development can be done with EDA money. You don't build the housing, but you can definitely do the pre-development. And especially for affordable housing, then we can layer on tax credits. And I started thinking about it, and I said, this is the workaround. This allows the federal government to come in and do this in an already structured environment for an agency that's been effectively closed. And Bob's your uncle. We don't have to have the county. We don't have to have the state. We don't have to have a congressionally created model. We can do this tomorrow. And we can use all the tools like AB 797. And it really hit me when I was told that the the disaster investment fund was not going to happen because the governor's office had no interest in bringing out capital solutions to our problems. And so the bottom line here is I am going to be having a discussion with hopefully some people next week about this so that we can help people understand that this is a model. We're done waiting around. And if we have to wait around for CDBG money, the HUD money to come, it could be years. This could be implemented tooth sweet, to put it en français. Like, we can get
Mhm.
going now. So what are we waiting for? Oh, because the county and the state, let them fight with each other all they want. And maybe there'll be some money that comes in and it'll be a fraction of what the number is. And they can do whatever they want with their county rebuilding authorities or not. It doesn't matter because this can get us the money where it needs to be and done in the way that the federal government's been asking it to be done. It doesn't
Right.
give them what the ultimate thing they don't get out of this is they don't get to be a state run model. But we're already seeing the federal government coming in and saying, you know what, we're sick and tired of the way it's gone in here anyway. So maybe this is the answer. I don't know. All right, there's
It's a
the
big
blur.
question, right? And this is what we've been talking about since the beginning is how do we get the money here? And then how do you utilize the money here? How do you implement the money here? So, I love that that is the conversation. And I love that despite what's happening here at our local government level, that this is still, it's still a conversation. I think it's easy for us to forget in our highly polarized world, very divisive times. We just had this, joke of a State of the Union. I won't even get into that propaganda bizarro thing. But, the reality is when you get beyond that layer of the onion, or maybe you don't because it's hard to, but there are still mechanisms through which to work on bipartisan solutions. Even if we don't talk about those things because it's really tough to talk about those things given what's happening um, at the federal level and what is being supported by too many people across the aisle and some on our side of the aisle. So, I think it is important at times to reframe and reset and recall that, there are some pathways to get this done, some
Well, the answer is that there are options. Now,
there's options.
if it's not chosen, there's other reasons. I mean, one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons I was pointed to a story this morning in Politico about the Secretary of Commerce. EDA falls under the Commerce Department,
Mm-hmm.
and the knives are out. I think everybody right now in Washington and the cabinet is starting to the discipline is starting to break down a little bit because the pressure's building with the incoming or the upcoming midterms and the let's just say less than effective model that has been used. I mean, you look at Secretary Nome and what's happened with her and how
Yeah.
she's been a complete
Ice Barbie.
disaster. I mean, it's sad, and I know so when they start sticking the knives in, how far this is going. I mean, it's very different than Trump first term. In the first term, they were all at each
Mm-hmm.
other the whole time. This one, they've been a little bit more disciplined, but is it starting to break down now that the situation is starting to become more acute and we're getting
Yep.
into the last 2 years and they're not, the implementation of things is going too slow potentially. And the tariffs have been a disaster, whether they want to admit it or not. They did not get what they wanted out of it. I know somebody who said this was probably going to happen. Um, and so what's going to happen in DC will affect what we're doing here on the ground, unfortunately. And the knives coming out for the Secretary of Commerce and saying that he likes to hog the deals and do the big deals and he's all talk and no action.
Mm-hmm.
Does that create a barrier for us to get this model implemented? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's just we need something to change the status quo, Shauna. I mean,
Yeah.
it's got to happen.
I mean, it has to happen at every level, right? I mean, we have to figure out how to break out of this
And
nightmare that we are
and you
all
can't look at
entrenched
LA
in.
or California and say this is the model of good governance. I mean, I, you could be the most ardent Democrat in the world. You cannot, with an honest opinion, say this is working out well.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's so we've talked about this in the past and it's again, I'll repeat myself for the thousandth time and saying, the call is coming from inside the house, right? It's so hard. We don't have anyone to blame but ourselves here. And
You get what you
You know,
vote for.
yeah, I mean, well, I would disagree. Actually, on that point, I entirely disagree. We have so many people are like, "Oh, but you keep voting for this," because there's no better option. It's two sides of the same coin. At least this side of the coin is not espousing hateful, divisive rhetoric that is
I am
going to get
not
your
saying the
neighbors
other side is any
snatched
better.
off the street.
No.
Okay, so but it's It's brutal. It is brutal that we don't have better options. It's brutal that we don't have accountability. We don't have any means to stop the corruption. We don't have, I mean, that is everywhere. I think that that is the biggest statement in all of this, is that in California, where we are arguably doing better than the majority, okay? We are the better example. It's still a disaster.
Well,
Okay? It's
that's
like
my
we're
point.
better, but it's still terrible, and these all of our electeds are still in these pockets. All of our electeds, especially here in Altadena, who are like, "Oh, we support you. You're so we're here for Altadena. We're doing all these things for Altadena." And in the same breath, passing legislation that allows, our abuser, so to speak, SCE in this case, to continue to get away with this shit, to continue to be allowed to raise rates and have us pay for our own recovery, have us pay for our own fires, disaster settlements, have us continue to pay now for the undergrounding, right? It's insane. We're not just paying for the undergrounding and watching SCE decimate the very little that's left of our, historic centuries old or century old tree canopy. We're now looking at, like, if you were so lucky, and I say lucky in air quotes because those who know, and we've talked about this, that those with standing homes are not lucky. They have their own unique nightmares, separate of those of us who are a total loss. But while different, are equally nightmarish. And those folks, if you have a standing home, it's more expensive for you than someone like me who lost it all to now have to pay, because yes, you have to pay to bring the power lines from the street back up onto your property. And the estimates for that have been, for many people, $40,000 to $50,000. So on top of everything else, they are looking, people now, if you have a standing home that you're trying to remediate, you're trying to do all of this, insurance isn't paying for anything, you're fighting tooth and nail. Now, on top of that, you have the added insult to injury of, oh yeah, here it's going to be, oh, we did undergrounding on your street. Isn't that great? P.S. We took out the last few trees that, were standing because we didn't decide, it wasn't worth it for us to plan around that. Could be avoided, but they just don't care. And then 2, you're gonna pay for the privilege. And then 3, oh yeah, we were also too lazy and too cheap to underground the transformers, which is done in, other communities, but not in ours. We're looking at these massive transformer vaults, like huge boxes that are set in the easement square smack dab right in front of someone's new home or their existing home. It's beyond shameful what this corporation, and that's what this is, it's a for-profit business, is allowed to get away with here, just as we are seeing, the corporate machine take over, well, they've already taken over the entire country.
Well,
You
it's
know?
just
That's
it,
it. It's like
the
profits and shareholders over everyone else. Fuck everybody else. It's so
well,
disturbing, Steve.
the irony is this is why 6 out of 10 people are looking at the billionaires tax. It's because
Yeah.
what's the alternative? The alternative is
There isn't.
corrupt, and yet at the same time, is that the right answer? No, it's just it's a knee jerk
Mm-mm.
reaction.
Bullshit. It is the right answer. If you are a billionaire and we are now looking at an emerging trillionaire class, where do you think that money's
It's
coming from?
I
They're just squeezing every bit of blood out of the
I
people,
get it.
you
I
know?
get it. I get it. But my
And they should pay
argument,
their share.
they and I'm not against that. However, I would also say that wealth taxes are taking, and that is a different level. There's a different. Do I believe that they should be able to use the money that they get for free? If they borrow against it because it's cheaper to pay the interest on the principal that they're borrowing against their assets to be able to fund their lifestyle? No, I think that that's something that needs to be addressed. But do I believe that wealth should be taxed? No, I don't think that that works. I think it's complicated. I think it's messy. I think it's
I think that
punitive.
when you get into this realm, because again, we've talked about this, it's really hard for most people to even conceptualize how much money this is and how much money these people have extracted out of this country. And I say that because that's what it is. Like they didn't just get rich off of their, ingenuity. No, they're getting, like, you look at Amazon, look at Bezos, it is a sickness. It is the monkey hoarding all of the bananas while the other monkeys starve. That's a sickness.
I agree.
And
And I think that they should, but I do not believe that giving that money for the purposes that people are talking about is going to serve the purpose that's going to solve the problem. We also have a fucking major problem in this state and in this country, It's a spending problem of
Yeah.
this state in particular. And what
But do we?
by vilifying
Do we have a
vilifying
spending problem, or do we have a problem with money finding its way into too many pockets
well,
on the way to solving the
that's the
issues?
cost side of the ledger. Like nobody's going there. Everybody's focused on the other things, and nobody is focused on the why are we even talking about more taxes? And are we even doing this right? And what are we doing?
Yep.
We're just giving more and more and more and more. So what do? We distract everybody by vilifying billionaires and saying, you know what, they are a shit show, and yes, I believe that we have to deal with that. But no, that is not the answer because we have some serious problems in this state, and they are taxing them is distracting you from the reality that we have more money than ever coming into this state, and we are spending it more than we've ever spent it, and we are not getting shit for it. And where the hell is it going? Where is the $160 million in charitable money that was put out to fire victims? Where has that gone? That is a
I
fraction of
know.
a fraction of a
We
fraction
know.
of this problem.
You've heard
$24
me say
billion
trickle down
to
economics.
$24 billion we've spent from this state, not even the federal matches for homelessness. What the
Yep.
fuck? We haven't taken
Yep.
that number down. And I'm sorry, I'm swearing, but I'm like, we spend more on students today, and we have more money coming into our schools than ever. And
Yep.
we are
And
not
less than ever. And
and we
less
have less
funding than ever.
students ever there, and they can't even read. They
Yeah.
can't even write. Talk to
Yep.
professors at university. Talk to
Well, we were
college.
just having this conversation, you and I offline separately, in relation to our own, personal experiences. But the reality that this generation of kids, that you and my peers have had, um, it is the first time ever that they are underperforming compared to the last generation. Every generation is improved. Like that is the goal. You want every generation, right? Like your kids should have better than you did, right? That's always the goal. We know that on so many levels that has not been the case for the last generation and the next one, right? It's that's just it. Like these kids, I don't know how the hell they're ever going to buy homes, but
Well,
outside
wait
of
till
that,
the
or
baby
even like
boomers
cobble
leave.
together a living, but
Just wait till the
now
baby
it's like,
boomers leave.
I know.
That we are about to see the number of people owning homes to go down dramatically because the baby
Yep.
boomers are going to be gone and our prices are going to crater.
Yep.
Like this is the whole thing is that we're treating the symptom, not the problem. And what
Mm-hmm.
I've always tried to do when I address policy issues, and my readers will know this, is I'm trying to address the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get distracted by the symptom because the symptom is not the issue. And if you're being distracted by the symptom, that means the people who are benefiting from the problem will continue to do so.
Yep.
And that has happened here in Altadena. That's happening in our state. That's happening in our city. That's happening in our country. And
Yep.
if you really believe that you want to fight the power, then you need to get beyond the symptom. Do not fall for the bullshit. And too many people are doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that on the left, and I'm saying that on the right, and I'm saying that in the
Mm-hmm.
center. Stop falling for the victim and stop falling for the villain because it's not real. It's designed to dumb you down.
Yep.
And it's so like we saw it with Prop 50. Trump, 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 Trump. It had
I
nothing to
know.
do with Trump.
Exactly.
I don't know what to do. Sorry.
I know. No, I know. I mean, I share your frustration because, I had a very different belief system prior to this fire, right? I mean, I say often that like none of us are the same people after the fire for 100 reasons. We're not. And it's like you have to kind of reorder your reality, and we change. Like people, like we are literally not the same people after the fire. And it's not just because of what we'd had to do. It's there's so many layers to that. But um my point was just that, I am very much, a blue voter. I'm a Democrat. And, more often than not, some of my policies, I have some, fiscal things that lean a little more what we call moderate Democrat. Maybe, decades ago would have even been, touching into Republican territory. But for the most part, especially on socialist issues, especially on, um, you know, uh, anything around welfare for individuals, for cities, I definitely lean practically, democratic socialist, progressive, what we call progressive today. And even with that, it's impossible to ignore all the problems in our own party. It's impossible. And it's like once, I liken what the experience that we've all had to have, those of us who, like myself, like you, other community organizers and leaders, I'll use Jane Lawson at EFRU as an example, Eaton Fire Residents United, who's been working really hard herself, as a grassroots organizer, and also now, working on legislation for some sort of baseline guidelines for contamination issues and basically a way to get insurers to do their job and pay when people have standing homes after a disaster that they can't return to safely and shouldn't be forced to, which is what's happening in our community. But I use that and she's working. I got to add legislation with your guy, with your boy John, right? So, but your boy.
By the
So
way, everybody go to Pete at 12 to 1:30 on Sunday and sign his paperwork for him being reelected or
yeah.
running
So,
again.
yep. So, actually, yes, that's our assemblyman, John Harabedian, to get on the ballot. They need signatures, and he's hosting an event at Pete's Coffee. Which Pete's Coffee, Steve?
The one on South Lake at
On
California.
South Lake at California in Pasadena, this Saturday, right? The 28th?
Yeah, you see, I don't do the plugs like you do.
Yeah, well, we have to give people the info. So I'm not the plug. This is like, go do your civic duty. If you want candidates that are at least trying, no, there's no perfect candidate. There's no perfect candidate. There's no candidate that's going to make all the right policy calls. I've learned, again, from the inside out, half the candidates don't even understand half the issues themselves until, they have it very clearly, explicitly explained to them by people in the community. And it's incumbent upon us to get those issues in front of them and do this work. But anyhow, my point with all of this was just that, for all of those of us who are on the inside or who have found ourselves on the inside of these issues because we have to, speaking for the community because we have no leadership doing it right for us, the education has been quite, quite the revelatory, right? Where you, I feel, I keep saying it's like, peeking behind the curtain at Disneyland, it's like, for anyone who ever watched South Park, like there's some really great South Park episodes about Disneyland and Mickey Mouse. Like Mickey Mouse is like, the like Bob Iger, like like the big bad, right? It's like you see behind the scenes, Mickey's like beating the boy bands, like, and screaming at everyone and is right. Mickey was, oh, why didn't you do what you're supposed to do, you little assholes? Ah, I taught you what to do. Anyhow, it's fucking brilliant. And I feel like that is like behind the curtain of the Democratic Party in this state. Like, holy shit. Like I actually really, Gavin Newsom, imperfect. Okay. Imperfect candidate, imperfect man, like everyone else. Okay. Show me anybody who doesn't have skeletons. Literally everyone does, right? Everyone. Now, then the best that you can do is acknowledge that shit, actually try and learn from it, try and be better, do better, and, move forward, right? That's it. But when you get into it, then you really do start to understand the corruption and how many decisions are made just to continue to consolidate that power and control and maintain, which is what we're seeing play out here in county, right? Oh my gosh, it's so disturbing.
It's everywhere. This is power, and
It's
this is what
so
people don't
disturbing.
understand.
Yeah, these folks are drunk with power and then they just want to keep it. They're
well,
like they're
it
they're
becomes the game.
intoxicated.
It becomes the game. I Anybody who reads my Substack notices that I capitalize the word power because
Yeah.
it's more than just lowercase POWER. I mean, it is the currency. It is not money at all because money follows the power. I've said that 1,000 times and I will continue to believe that. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine from back when I was dealing with these lawsuits back in DC. I was reading through my book that I wrote about it. I haven't published it, but I wrote it. And it's weird that that's all coming back this week and all this stuff is starting to happen federally again.
Yep.
And he called me out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him in over a year since the fires, and he had a guy on the call with him. They both were the other guy was probably in his 80s. And I was telling somebody that they called up and I spoke with him. They go, the old guys just don't want to let go. It's the game. It's recover. They call them recovering politicians because it's an addiction. It's a drug. And I think that that's something that people don't understand is that once you get into it, it's different than any. Once it touches you, once it's around you. I've written numerous pieces on that over the last year. I've talked about some of the people in our community that are going to be touched by it and what happens when it goes away and how they
Yep.
they have you start chasing that dragon, so to speak, as they say about heroin, right? Like the idea
Right.
of you're trying to replace that high that you had and you can't replace it. And so you're like a gambler at the table, and once you start to lose, trying to get back to zero, you make bigger and bigger stretches. And that's when you see electeds or people in the public sphere taking positions. You're going, you think they're jumping the shark, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, where did that come from? It's
Yep.
because you can't let go. Once you're there, once you have the accolades, once you have the media calling you and getting those quotes, and you're getting on TV, and you're in a room and everybody's sidling up to you, and they're inviting you to parties, and they're inviting you to these events, and coming up to you, and all the great, the act, the wow, thank you so much for all you're doing, like you get every day, Shauna. Like,
Yep. Yeah.
once you get that, losing it is hard. Once you're in the game, it's
It's
hard to step away.
I think it's hard if that's why you're doing it, right?
But I
Like I
think
get it. I
sometimes you
I I
lose the thread, and
well,
that's
I don't know.
you get that
I
when
suppose some do. It
I
it
think it's
it
very easy to get caught up in it. I mean,
yeah,
it
no, I'm
is.
sure it is. I mean, we've had this conversation around, some of our community, organizers, right? People who've inserted themselves into the space and inserted themselves as, speaking for survivors, et cetera. And that, it's like you see it when the conversation and the talking points, that are being leveraged in the media are very clearly not sound and very clearly all about just keeping those people in the media and keeping the machine going because now they're taking money. They have a fiscal sponsor. They have to keep it going. They have to have something. And
But they can't
it
solve it.
correct.
They
Well,
have to have an
yeah, but
unsolvable problem.
yes, exactly. It has to be an unsolvable problem because otherwise you can't just keep it going and keep
Yes,
getting funding. And
and
it is wild. It's been wild to watch that process and watch that play out with, some of these folks. And yeah, it's this is again, it's like it's a hard call not to take money. I very much it's not a luxury I will have forever. It's not a luxury that most will ever have. Um to do that. But while I can, it's why I do it because, none of that comes without strings, without, you know, even if they're subtle strings, they are there. There are expectations. You have to keep it going. You have to, hit all of your benchmarks, do all the things, and also toe the line for whomever is funding you. Whether that is
it's
spoken or unspoken, that is the reality.
well, and again, I think it's when you aren't used to it, or when you're not in the game, so to speak, and you get brought into the game,
Mhm.
you don't understand how to operate in that environment, and that becomes very dislocating for a lot of people. It becomes very disorienting. And
Yep.
I think in sociology, I remember my first year sociology class, they had Emile Durkheim had a theory called anomie, or something like that. It's a French word. And we talked about it in the context of like movie stars, right? When you go from
Mhm.
having like when your life changes dramatically in a very short period of time, you lose perspective because your context is all off. And I think that that's what happens is that to get into the public sphere and to be in the political game, to be writing legislation, to be in those meetings, to be doing things that you've never been able to do and influencing things on a very high level. If you're not taken into it gradually, if it's just like thrust on you and then you're in that position, it becomes very disorienting for people because they don't understand what happens, and then it just what does it do to you and how does it change you? And
Right.
it's a fascinating, as you said, it's fascinating to watch it happening in front of us.
Mhm. It is fascinating. It's been fascinating, to see all of this. I keep saying in so many ways, Um, This is like a giant social experiment, right? I say this about my group all the time. And the Substack and Instagram. I mean, all of it, what we've gone through with, Altadena for accountability and seeing how that's played out and how polarizing the things that should not have been polarizing, things that are so basic that have been made polarizing. And then to have that experience of, people not wanting to publicly support, not publicly sign on, not publicly anything. And then watching that evolve to where other people, including some of our electeds, started to use our talking points around investigation because it suited them to do so. And they realized that, they were up against something they couldn't really combat. So instead, they started to take up our talking points, but without really doing anything meaningfully. And I love John, but even John, switched up his language from audit to investigation. And it's not really an investigation, it's an audit. But that was very convenient to then take that language and tie into this, this, momentum that we had built. And now that we have accomplished this, that we have the Attorney General investigation underway, that we've done the work, that this group that started out before me working on this for a year, and then many months of our little tight strategy team that was a part of this group, that made this happen and was in person in that meeting with the Attorney General. I will never stop singing everybody's praises. Everyone has worked so effectively and passionately to get that done, and I'm so proud to work with that group of people. But now to see other organizers that was crickets, it was crickets, and now they're all, oh, look at this investigation. Look at this. Oh, look
We
what
had
we
that.
did. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what we
Yeah.
who?
That happened to us with our lawsuit. Like
Holy
nobody was
shit.
there until they
It's
wanted to take credit for it.
shameless.
It's the way they do it. What is it? What did I tell you earlier? Victory has 1,000 fathers, defeat is an orphan.
Yeah.
Everybody claims parentage of the victory, but they only do that
Correct.
after the victory takes place.
After others, on the backs of others, and in this case, on the backs of, largely, Black women, which made it particularly, I'm just going to use the word distasteful.
Well, when you're in the public sphere, this is what happens. And you have to be prepared for it because this is what they do to you.
Yeah. And it's like, no one, I don't think anyone is like, oh, we need credit. We need this. We need this. But like,
No, but you want
also,
acknowledgement. You want a little bit of like, have a little class. Like, hey,
correct.
you did the work. Good job. We appreciate
Exactly.
what you did.
Like feel free to, to ride that and to share it and to, be part of that celebration, but not without acknowledging the people who did that work and got it
Well,
there.
I have a friend, he's now a business partner. He was in the military. The military had a saying, credit is indivisible. So why don't you just give it? It doesn't cost anything to give people credit, and you can give it to as many people as you want. Why do people try to hoard it? And he was always having trouble in the civilian world trying to understand why civilians can't just give credit. Like, who cares?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like, how hard is it to give credit to people where it's due? Like, I don't know. I realized years ago, working with teams, that I wasn't always the best about that. Even for myself, like I was the worst about doing my own PR, the worst, and talking about, my accomplishments personally with my various businesses and things. But I made it like a concerted, once I was really aware of that, I made a concerted effort always to assign credit where due. Like, I will give you an example. Like every time I even use like a catch for like a phrase, and I've done on this podcast that like came from Mr. Beer, right? Marcus and I are very separated at this point, but also very much still, very friends and close, and we talk regularly. Every time I use something of his, I'm quick to add that like it came from him because I feel like attribution is important and I don't want to be a ripoff merchant.
Well, that
And if
and
I
what is
catch
it?
myself, I correct it because I think it's shitty and weird not to do it. So anyhow, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, also, what is it?
Maybe we just haven't
And
all learned that lesson yet.
and no, and because to me, it shows whether you're secure or not. And to the people that are really in the background, that really understand the game, who are the real power brokers, they'd understand it too. And when they see people taking attribution of other people's work, they know what that means. And they know that if you're not willing to share the credit, what is that going to say about you? I mean, it's the old once a cheater, always a cheater model. And so that's what it means. And the irony too is that imitation's the greatest form of flattery. Like you're doing it by not saying it.
Yep.
And if you're imitating something, then that means that you must be doing something right. I mean, as we all know, it's been more and more of the words that are written on the Substack and said here are starting to show up. So
Yeah.
it'd be nice to have a little attribution, but it's fine.
Yep. Yeah. Again, I don't think anyone's in it for like, oh, we need credit. But at the same time, if you're going to talk about it, you can't talk about it without acknowledging the people who do the work. Yeah. It's again, to me, it's just like the most fascinating sociological experiment to see what all is going on, right? And how this is all played out and what's going to continue to happen. And I think we've already seen a number of things that I know that you called specifically have come to play and come into play and come to pass. And it's the same, on all of this. So anyhow, it's a fascinating thing. I'm going to jump us into another topic. Since we've talked about, the EDA push, Barger's rebuild authority motion, where this money is going to flow and how it's going to flow, if it's going to flow at all. The federal money that may or may not come.
It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
It's when, right? It's going to get here. So it's going to be a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
In one form or another. So it's going to be a fascinating thing to continue to watch, and we will continue to watch and talk about it. But another thing that's happening here locally in Altadena, and I believe this impacts the Palisades as well, but it's especially, here, is the Zone Zero topic. So to refresh the memories of anyone who isn't familiar, the Zone Zero is a proposed highly contested 5-foot ember buffer zone around homes, which requires you to basically have moonscape 5 feet around your house, like no climbing vines. Like this was that whole like, oh no, the bougainvillea took out the town. Yeah, it fucking didn't. Okay. Like this is why the Zone Zero thing is highly contested and is kind of laughable in a lot of ways, is that, what saved our homes, ironically, were those of us who had trees really close to the house. That's what saved the houses.
Especially deodars.
Correct. So it's like, oh no, let's take out the trees around the house. No, dummies. Like that's actually what saved us. Not to mention we need the trees for 100 other reasons, which I welcome everyone to Google in the context of climate change and understand we need these trees, like desperately need these trees. But by all means, let's, see how many we can let SCE kill and then take out the rest with stupid policy. Oh man, I hate dumb policy, dumb reactive reductive policy, which is what this is. So they want to, they think it, you know me, I'm so subtle, never, and such a wallflower.
Subtle like a sledgehammer.
Oh man. So, they were like saying that, that there's all this debate around this and the fact that, can this help? Won't it? Will it not? And, the critique of this, the opposition is that, very simply that the strict rules are expensive. They harm local ecology. The well-watered green vegetation was undeniably, indisputably a fire barrier. Go look at Christmas Tree Lane, where it looks like the fire didn't happen. And that was because the cedars saved the street. Just that's it, period, end of story. So it's really tough to look at this and not feel some sort of way about it for all of us in Altadena. And this is back now. They're really trying hard to push this through, despite all of this pushback. And the thing about this that struck me the most that isn't really being talked about is that like this is a requirement around your 5-foot easement. What 5-foot easement? What fucking 5-foot easement? Okay, so we
Have
historically
you seen the houses that are being built right up on the fence lines.
Oh, we're gonna talk about it for a minute, okay? So, for context for the listener, again, the
drive
9,000
down Mendocino at Mar Vista and you'll see it. You'll see
let's get a little background before we get into the hotel. Yeah, I know. The hotel that is going up, and yes, exactly. And the standing existing home is like literally shadowed by this massive behemoth of a new structure. But it's important to have a little context here and understand, what we're talking about and where the commentary and frustration comes from. Um, uh, the reality is for us in Altadena, we had a lot of like we lost 9,000 structures, right? And not lar- predominantly 9,000 historic structures. And, things were built, like my house, my community was 100 plus years old. Um, and things were built in a very different way. I had to go through quite a bit of back and forth with the county when I did not long ago, when I did my solar and my battery install, because you were supposed to have a 5 foot easement between you and the next, neighbor. And that didn't exist. We had barely a 2 foot easement, not even. Okay. That's the distance between me and the home next to me. There's no question that our community burned the way it did because of that density. Again, like even the massive oak tree on my property didn't make it simply because it was sandwiched between so many structures. Um, the heat of those structures took out the tree. Otherwise, the tree would have been protective. But in this case, it was the heat of the structures that took out the tree, not the tree itself catching fire. It was the other way around. The tree went up after the structures were well underway, on fire. So with that, understanding, we didn't have those easements. And so people who are rebuilding what they're calling like for like, where you're effectively building the same thing or similar enough in square footage, in number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and footprint, not necessarily exterior style or style of the home or even you have a little leniency on your square footage, but what qualifies under the like for like, you can be grandfathered into the old easement that may have only been, like me, barely 2 feet, right? But if it is a new build, you are not that you are supposed to have to follow the current requirements, which give you that 5 foot easement. Except that's not happening. So just like county told us that they would follow our CSD, which is our community standards district, that gives you, guidelines for what you can and cannot build. That got tossed out the window, and SB9 has been allowed. They rolled the red carpet out for SB9. And again, listeners, if you're listening for the first time or you don't recall this, you missed that episode, you can do a quick search of our show notes and look for the episodes where we've talked about the CSD and SB9, and you will find those things, and to get some more context and background. But, again, the reality is those easements aren't happening. So, how the heck are we talking about like, oh, let's reduce vegetation because the vegetation's the problem, when because our number one objective here, and I say our, meaning county in this rebuild, is to increase the tax base. They want like it's like build, it's like, drill baby drill. It's build baby build bigger, everybody. We've talked about what's happening on a number of streets. We in our last, episodes before we took the break, we went over some of that reality of like what was happening in one little stretch of Maiden Lane alone, of massive development of new homes and parcel splitting, that was evidenced by water meter requests, right? We're now seeing it for real. One of my neighbors around the corner on Santa Anita, north of Altadena Drive, said, Shauna, you got to come look at this. This is like a 25-inch easement, if that. And then this building that's supposed to be like for like is so significantly larger and taller than what was there previously. You have the wall between their properties here, and the eaves are over. The eaves of the ADU, which is like a behemoth, is like over that. I mean, there's another property that I've been following because it's one of the many that an unscrupulous developer has buried some very, very contaminated earth material on. And so I've been like documenting and videotaping and watching everything that they've been doing. And they just marked out for the foundation. So they've buried contaminated soil, capped it with clean soil, marked it for a new foundation. And if you measure the foundation to the wall and the property line, it's like barely 2 feet. And you have to go like, how is this happening? How is this
It's
happening?
all the
But like,
inspections. Great management by the
oh
county.
my gosh,
They
it's
don't care.
unreal.
They only care about
They
parcel
really don't
tax.
care. I
Yeah.
know they don't care. I hate to say that they don't care, but they really don't care. And
No, it's just about
it
getting the revenue in right now.
yeah, yep. So as we talk about accountability or the total lack thereof, as we round out this episode, our friend, our mysterious friend, at Altadena Water Wars. I think we've had some word that Altadena Water Wars might return, and I find that very interesting because boy, oh boy, that drama hasn't sizzled down, simmered down at all. It's still sizzling. Las Flores Water, which happens to be my water municipal, who's had or mutual rather, who's had a lot of issues. They're the least solvent. They're the most financially, at risk, least assets, fewest number of customers,
Had no
highest
wells.
number.
Yeah.
Correct. The wells destroyed, highest number of customers, not in service, like myself, because we had such a significant, density of places just completely destroyed. So who won't be back for years. So they're in the worst shape. Well, if you recall, we'd had the in-person meeting that was followed by the Rubio Canyon mutual meeting and then the Lincoln Water mutual meeting. Very without any commentary, without any additional conversation or notification, Las Flores passed that rate hike. They just did it. So it'll be, I would expect that Rubio and Lincoln will do the same. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. And I very much hope our friend at Altadena Water Wars does return because there's a lot to talk about, and I'm very, very curious.
Well, they got to figure out how the hell they're going to rebuild. I mean,
Yep. Yeah.
they've got tens of millions of dollars to be, if not more. They got to come.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So we're gonna see how it goes. So with that, I'm gonna take us into our kind of our community shout out, small biz, and what's going on. So something you and I talked about this a while back. That community is in so many respects the greatest act of resistance, right? And that to know your neighbor, the importance of relationships with people who are very different from us, and being reminded that the fire is effectively like super glue for our community, right? And I kept thinking about that, and people who know our group know that we've always had, we had a book club, we had a cooks club that had cookbook meetups and had potlucks and we had in-person happy hours at various spots. There were a lot of, we've been doing this a long time, right? This is a pre-fire thing. But really trying to figure out how to do it in a meaningful way post-fire, how to have, and we have various groups and gatherings, but what we started doing a couple weeks ago were regular weekly Beautiful Altadena office hours. So we've been on Wednesdays from 11 to 1. We have been going from, rotating coffee shops. We were at Unincorporated Coffee one week. We were at, yesterday we were at Highlight Coffee on Lincoln, which I love Frank. And if you go to Highlight, try the pineapple lime espresso tonic. It's life-changing. I didn't think I was into that kind of thing. Oh my gosh, it's so good, Steve. It's like the most delicious espresso drink ever. I think I'm back. I'm going to try and make one myself at home and see how it goes. It's so good. So we were there. Next week we will be at Lavender and Honey, which technically is Pasadena, but for those who don't know, is owned by an Altadena female business owner who sadly lost her home, like so many of us. And so it's been really fantastic, and it's been a great time for community. People come out, they get to connect with one another. They're sometimes sharing rebuild stories, sharing remediation stories, sharing displacement stories, and just sharing, shooting the shit with people who get it, because I don't think anyone other than all of us who've experienced this could possibly understand what this is like, short of talking to people, fire survivors from other towns. And, I want to add to that, we keep talking about finding the joy wherever you can, right? I've talked about this before. It's like this whole thing has taken so much from everybody that you have to find the joy where
Shauna.
kind of every time that I know for me, every time I'm with our people, so to speak, every time I go to grab a coffee in Altadena after I'm at my lot, anything like that, I say it feeds my soul, right? To be with our people. So we've now created that opportunity weekly. It's the BA office hours, come every week. And back to that, looping back to what I was saying of like finding the joy. I met a woman who was not there for the BA office hours, but then knew of our group and was like, she's like, oh, this is perfect kismet. I'm so happy to be here. And then she started to share with me her story of how she, because of the evacuation, he's her fiance now. They met on January 11th and they were engaged last December.
That's great.
And there are so many of those stories that are just so positive, and it's nice to be reminded. I'm not a silver linings person. I think that's the wrong way to frame what's happened to all of us. But we have to be reminded that there is still joy, that there is still life, that there are still positive out things, and take the pleasure that we can from that. And sometimes it's as simple as coming out and talking to your neighbors and sharing a coffee, and having, a minute to be reminded of that you are not alone, because we are not. Yeah.
And thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for being.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to be with everyone. So I'm going to shout out one other local. That's like our thing. I want to make sure that people know about that. And there's an RSVP. You can find a link with information and RSVP on our Instagram and in our private group. But RSVP is not necessary. It's 11 to 1. People can drop in anytime. You can drop in for half an hour, stay for the whole 2 hours. We've run long, but the last couple of weeks because people have just lingered and wanted to hang out and talk. But I want to give another proper business shout out to Parker at Hardy Californians. So those who don't recall, we actually did a beautiful Altadena thing with Parker when we were doing we did a few, kind of like info sessions and roundtables, and he was talking about soil remediation. So for those who don't know Parker, I met Parker a few years ago when I started doing all this reno, kind of like sensitive historic renovation of my property, my 100-year-old Jane's Cottage. And I really wanted to do, I had a huge front lawn, like a big slope hill, and I wanted to do all natives and like get rid of my grass. And it became a running joke because I stopped watering my St. Augustine grass for years. Like, oh, I'll let it die and then I can remove it. It never died. I always tell people are like, oh, with your, like I'm like the asshole using all the water for my green lawn. I'm like, I'm not. I haven't watered this in years. This is just like, if you want to have a drought friendly lawn, established St. Augustine grass. Okay, I'll leave it at that. But if you want to do what most of us want to do and have natives, Parker at Hardy Californians is fantastic. They have you can buy by the pound a bioremediation native flower and plant seed mix. That's what I personally put on the front of my lot after I did that 6-inch scrape and capped it with clean earth and all of that. I dropped a little bit of fresh soil and then put the seeds out before we had all those heavy rains, and I can see lots of little plant sprouts, and I'm super excited to have just like a big field of native flowers soon. But what they are doing separately, and what I wanted to talk about for all of us here on the podcast, is they are doing plans, just like the Foothill catalog is having pre-approved plans for homes. They now have plans that they're getting pre-approved and are kind of ready to go for native gardens. You can just like pick a look and take it and do that and replicate it and have it be significantly less expensive than it would be if you were trying to do it, on the fly or custom. But they're really beautiful. So for anyone who's curious, go check out Parker at Hardy Californians, check out their plans, check out their bioremediation seed mix, and you can also go see them in person in Sierra Madre where they have a local spot. So there we are.
Awesome. All right. So 2 for 2, eh, Shauna?
2 for 2.
All right. Lunchtime. Blood sugar
It's
levels
lunchtime.
dropping.
Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for joining
you.
us. As always, I am Shauna Dawson-Beer, beautiful Altadena. I'm here with Steve Sachs.
The Alta Policy Geek. Alta Policy Walk.
Yes, he's all of the things. You can find us both on Instagram. And I'm sorry, you can find us both on Substack. You can find me on Instagram. You can find our private groups on Facebook. You can find us actually on Slack as well. So until next time, thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.